Commander Zethkar clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. The hegemony's expansion had proceeded flawlessly for the past 3 centuries. World after world had fallen to their superior technology and military might. Species that had once thought themselves masters of their domains now served as tributaries, providing resources and labor to fuel the ever-growing empire. The bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge, hummed with quiet efficiency. His crew moved with practiced precision, monitoring the dozens of conquered systems under their jurisdiction. Each blinking light on the tactical display represented millions of beings who had learned to bow before hegemony superiority. "Sir," his communications officer, a scaled Vorthon, announced from her station. "We are receiving a priority transmission from the exploration fleet in Sector 7 Alpha." Zethkar's secondary eyes swiveled toward the officer, while his primary pair remained fixed on the display. "Put it through." The holographic projector activated, revealing the image of Fleet Admiral Corinth, whose blue-tinged exoskeleton marked him as one of the warrior caste from the Hegemony Core worlds. The Admiral's usual composed demeanor seemed slightly strained. "Commander Zethkar," Corinth began, his voice carrying the slight static of long-range transmission. "We have encountered a new species in the Sol system. Initial scans suggest a single inhabited world, 3rd planet from their star." "And," Zethkar prompted, already mentally cataloging the standard procedures for first contact and subsequent integration into the hegemony. "They call themselves humans," Corinth continued, "bipedal, carbon-based, limited to their single world. Their technology appears primitive by our standards, though they have achieved basic spaceflight. However, there's something unusual about their response to our presence." Zethkar's interest piqued. Most species reacted to first contact with the hegemony in predictable ways. Fear, followed by desperate attempts at negotiation, then eventual submission when faced with overwhelming technological superiority. The pattern had repeated itself across hundreds of worlds. "Explain." "They didn't seem intimidated," Corinth said, his mandibles clicking in what Zethkar recognized as confusion. "When we broadcast our standard introduction and demands for submission, they requested time to consider their options. They've been silent for 3 days now." A laugh rumbled through Zethkar's chest. 3 days? And you're concerned about this delay? Admiral, perhaps your recent victories have made you forget how some primitive species react. Fear can manifest as denial. Give them another day, then demonstrate our capabilities. A show of force usually accelerates their decision-making process." "Understood, Commander. There is one other thing," Corinth added. "Our cultural analysts have been studying their communication networks. These humans seem to have a peculiar fascination with warfare and conflict. Their entertainment, literature, and historical records are filled with accounts of battles against impossible odds. They appear to celebrate struggle." Zethkar dismissed the concern with a wave of his upper arms. "Primitive romanticism. Every species has myths about their warrior past. It means nothing when faced with real power. Proceed with the demonstration, Admiral. I expect their surrender within the week." The transmission ended, and Zethkar returned his attention to more pressing matters. A small rebellion was brewing in the Kythera system, and the quarterly resource reports from 17 worlds required his review. The human situation was routine, hardly worth his continued attention. 6 days later, Admiral Corinth's next report shattered that assumption. "Commander," Corinth's image appeared again, but now his exoskeleton bore scorch marks, and his voice carried an edge of disbelief. "The humans have responded to our demonstration." The demonstration had been standard procedure, an uninhabited moon in their system, vaporized by a single shot from their primary battleship's main cannon. The message was clear: submit or face annihilation. And their response? Zethkar asked, though he already suspected the answer. They attacked us. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Zethkar's primary eyes blinked slowly, processing what he had heard. Clarify, Admiral. They launched a coordinated assault using their entire space fleet. Primitive vessels, yes, but they fought with a ferocity we haven't encountered before. They didn't attempt to flee when they realized they were outmatched. Instead, they adapted. Corinth's report continued, detailing a battle that defied every tactical analysis in hegemony records. The humans had used their inferior ships like missiles, ramming hegemony vessels after depleting their weapons. They had coordinated attacks with a precision that suggested military experience far beyond what their technology should have allowed. Casualties? Zethkar asked. We lost 3 escort cruisers and suffered damage to 2 more. The humans were completely destroyed, but... Corinth paused. Commander, in 400 years of expansion, no primitive species has ever inflicted casualties on a hegemony fleet during first contact. Zethkar felt a chill run through his carapace. The hegemony's success was built on psychological warfare as much as technological superiority. Species submitted because they understood they could not win. If word spread that humans had actually fought back successfully, what is the current status of their world? Unchanged. We detected increased military activity on the surface, but no attempts at communication. Our intelligence suggests they're mobilizing their entire population. For what purpose? Unknown. Commander, I request reinforcement of the fleet. These humans are... different. Zethkar considered the request. Standard protocol called for a single demonstration followed by occupation. The loss of ships was unexpected but not catastrophic. However, the principle at stake was larger than one primitive world. Admiral, you have 3 battle groups at your disposal. Surely that's sufficient to handle one planet of primitives? Normally, yes, but these humans seem to view warfare differently than other species. Our analysts believe they may actually prefer fighting to surrendering. The concept was so alien to hegemony, thinking that Zethkar struggled to process it. Every sentient species valued survival above honor. The mathematics of warfare always favored submission when faced with overwhelming odds. Begin orbital bombardment of their military installations, he ordered. Once their capacity for resistance is eliminated, they'll have no choice but to surrender. Sir, there's one more thing. We intercepted some of their internal communications. They've been broadcasting something they call war songs across their planet. The cultural analysts say it appears to be some form of pre-battle ritual. War songs. Zethkar filed the information away as another curiosity of primitive behavior. Proceed with the bombardment, Admiral. I want this situation resolved within the next rotation. But as Corinth's image faded, Zethkar found himself reviewing the tactical reports more carefully. The human attack patterns had shown remarkable innovation for a species that had never encountered energy weapons before. Their ship captains had made decisions that prioritized maximum damage to the enemy over their own survival. He pulled up the hegemony database of conquered species, searching for similar behaviors. The search returned no results. His communications officer interrupted his research. Sir, priority message from the exploration fleet. Zethkar looked up, noting that only 2 hours had passed since his conversation with Admiral Corinth. Far too soon for the bombardment to be complete. The Admiral reports that the orbital bombardment has commenced, but human military installations appear to be more heavily fortified than initial scans indicated. Additionally, their defensive measures include technologies not detected in preliminary surveys. What kind of technologies? Kinetic interceptor systems, energy dispersion fields, and underground facilities that extend far deeper than expected. The Admiral estimates it will require significantly more time to neutralize their military capability. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in irritation. What should have been a simple pacification was becoming a prolonged siege. Inform the Admiral that I'm dispatching additional support. This situation will be resolved quickly. But even as he gave the order, Zethkar couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The hegemony had built its empire on the premise that superior technology made victory inevitable. Every species they had encountered had accepted this reality. The humans seemed to be operating under different rules entirely. As his flagship adjusted course toward the Sol system, Zethkar reviewed the intelligence reports once more. The humans had a saying that their analysts had flagged, "Come and take them." The phrase had appeared throughout their history, spoken by defenders who chose to fight against impossible odds rather than surrender. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zethkar wondered if the hegemony might have encountered something they didn't understand. The journey to Sol system would take 8 days. During that time, daily reports from Admiral Corinth painted an increasingly puzzling picture. The humans continued to resist despite mounting losses. Their defensive installations showed remarkable redundancy. When one position fell, 2 more appeared to take its place. Most disturbing of all, they had begun to adapt their tactics in real time, developing countermeasures for hegemony weapon systems with impossible speed. "Sir," his tactical officer reported as they neared the Sol system, "long-range sensors are detecting significant energy signatures from the human homeworld." "Specify." "It appears they've activated some form of planetary defense grid. Energy output is approximately 40% of our main battle fleet's combined firepower." Zethkar stared at the readouts. According to initial surveys, the humans barely had fusion power. "How is that possible?" "Unknown, sir. Additionally, we're detecting launch signatures from various points on the planet's surface. They appear to be launching vessels." "Evacuation ships?" "Negative, sir. Configuration suggests military vessels, approximately 200 craft of unknown design." The tactical display updated as they entered sensor range of the Sol system. What Zethkar saw made no sense, according to everything the hegemony knew about technological development. The human homeworld was surrounded by a defensive network that rivaled anything the hegemony had built around their most important worlds. Energy weapons platforms hung in orbital positions, connected by some form of shield matrix. The planet's surface bristled with defensive installations. And rising from that surface, hundreds of ships unlike anything in hegemony records. "Admiral Corinth," Zethkar opened a communication channel. "Report." Corinth's image appeared, and immediately Zethkar knew something had gone very wrong. The Admiral's exoskeleton bore fresh damage, and his usual composed demeanor had been replaced by something approaching shock. "Commander, the humans have evolved their defensive capabilities. In the past week, they've constructed orbital defenses and launched a fleet that shouldn't exist." "Explain how a primitive species can construct advanced military installations in 7 days." "That's just it, sir. We don't think they constructed them. Our analysis suggests they had this capability all along but chose not to reveal it until they understood our tactics." The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been intimidated by the hegemony's demonstration of power. They had been studying it. "Casualties? We've lost 8 ships, including 2 battle cruisers. The human vessels are smaller but incredibly agile, and their weapons appear designed specifically to counter our defensive systems." Zethkar's mind raced through the tactical possibilities. If the humans had been hiding their true capabilities, if they had used the initial contact period to study hegemony technology and develop countermeasures, "Admiral, implement full defensive protocol and hold position. Do not engage unless directly threatened." "Sir, I need to contact High Command. This situation has developed beyond standard parameters." As Zethkar's communication with Admiral Corinth ended, he stared at the tactical display showing the Sol system. The humans had transformed their world into a fortress in less than a week. Their fleet, though smaller than the hegemony force, moved with coordination that suggested advanced tactical computing. But most unsettling of all was the realization that the humans hadn't panicked when faced with superior force. They had prepared for war. For the first time in hegemony history, Commander Zethkar wondered if they had finally encountered a species that couldn't be conquered. The thought terrified him. High Admiral Vex Thul had lived through 12 centuries of hegemony expansion. His office aboard the command station Eternal Dominance overlooked the sprawling shipyards of the core worlds, where thousands of vessels moved in perfect formation. The sight usually filled him with satisfaction, a reminder of the unstoppable force he commanded. Today, it brought him no comfort. The emergency session with the Hegemony Council had lasted 18 hours. The reports from the Sol system defied everything they understood about primitive species development. Commander Zethkar's request for additional reinforcements had been approved, but the implications went far beyond a single difficult conquest. "Sir," his aide, a young officer from the Intelligence Corps, entered with the latest analysis. "The Xenology Department has completed their assessment of the human response patterns." Vexathul gestured for him to proceed, though he doubted the report would contain anything that made sense of this situation. "The humans appear to operate under what our analysts are calling adaptive escalation. Unlike other species, who typically reveal their full defensive capabilities immediately when threatened, humans seem to deliberately match the level of force being applied against them." Meaning, when Admiral Corinth's fleet demonstrated superior firepower, the humans responded with exactly enough force to inflict casualties while appearing to be overwhelmed. When orbital bombardment began, they revealed planetary defenses capable of countering that specific threat. Each escalation by our forces has been met with a proportional human response. Vex Thul's primary eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting they've been holding back?" "More than that, sir. We believe they've been studying our tactical doctrine and developing specific countermeasures." The human ships that engaged Admiral Corinth's fleet were equipped with weapons designed to exploit the exact vulnerabilities in our hull configurations. The aide activated a holographic display showing the remains of the destroyed hegemony vessels. Vex Thul had seen thousands of battle damage reports over the centuries, but these were different. The damage patterns were too precise, too targeted. "How long would it take our best engineers to develop these countermeasures?" Vex Thul asked. "Working from captured enemy technology, approximately 6 months, sir." The humans did it in 6 days. The implications sat between them like a toxic cloud. Either the humans possessed technological development capabilities that far exceeded their apparent civilization level, or they had been preparing for this encounter long before the hegemony arrived. "There's more, sir. We've intercepted additional human communication since the engagement began. They're not just defending their world. They're mobilizing for what they call total war." Vex Thul had never heard the term before. "Explain total war." "According to our linguistic analysis, it means the complete dedication of their entire civilization to military action. Every human, every resource, every manufacturing facility has been converted to support their war effort. They've apparently suspended all other activities." The concept was absurd. No rational species would sacrifice their entire economy and social structure for a single military campaign. The costs would be catastrophic even if they won. That's not possible. No civilization can sustain such commitment. "Sir, that's what our social models predict as well. However, the energy signatures we're detecting from the human homeworld suggest they've achieved exactly that. Industrial output has increased by 800% in the past week." Vex Thul stood and moved to the viewport, staring out at the orderly progression of hegemony ships. Everything about their empire was built on logical principles. Species submitted because submission was logical. They preserved their populations and cultures in exchange for tributes and resources. It was a rational exchange that benefited everyone. "What are the humans hoping to achieve?" he asked. "Even if they repel this attack, we can return with larger forces. They must understand that resistance is futile." "Sir, our psychologists believe that humans may not think in terms of futility the way other species do. Their historical records show repeated instances of populations fighting against overwhelming odds not because they expected to win, but because they couldn't accept defeat." The aide brought up another display, showing human historical data that the intelligence teams had gathered from intercepted communications. They have a concept they call Pyrrhic victory, winning at such a high cost that the victory becomes meaningless. But they also celebrate defeats where their forces inflicted maximum damage before being destroyed. They seem to view the act of resistance itself as valuable, regardless of outcome. Vexthul turned back to face his aide. "You're telling me they might fight to extinction rather than surrender?" "It's possible, sir. There are documented cases in their history where human populations chose mass death rather than submit to conquest." The communication panel chimed with an incoming priority message. Vexthul accepted the transmission, and Commander Zethkar's image appeared. The commander looked exhausted, his usually perfect grooming replaced by the worn appearance of someone who had been in combat for days. "High Admiral, I need to report a significant change in the tactical situation." "Proceed." "The humans have launched an offensive. 3 hours ago, approximately 500 human vessels emerged from their defensive perimeter and engaged our forward positions. We were not prepared for their tactical approach." Vexthul felt a chill run through his carapace. "Clarify." "They attacked in waves, each ship carrying out what appears to be a suicide mission designed to inflict maximum damage. When their weapons were depleted, they rammed our vessels. When their engines failed, they detonated themselves as close to our ships as possible." The display showed the aftermath of the engagement. 12 hegemony ships had been destroyed or badly damaged. The human losses were total, but they had achieved something unprecedented in hegemony history. "High Admiral," Zethkar continued, "we've never faced an enemy that preferred mutual destruction to preservation. Our tactical computers can't predict behavior patterns that prioritize enemy casualties over survival." Vexthul stared at the damage reports. The hegemony's greatest advantage had always been their ability to predict enemy behavior. Fear of death made species predictable. But if the humans didn't fear death the same way, "What is the current status of your fleet?" "Combat effective, but morale is affected. The crew has never seen anything like the human attack patterns. Some of the younger officers are requesting transfers." Fear. His own people were becoming afraid of a species that shouldn't be able to threaten them. "Maintain position, Commander. Reinforcements are being prepared." The transmission ended, and Vexthul found himself alone with thoughts that violated every principle of hegemony doctrine. What if they had encountered a species that couldn't be conquered? Not because they were more technologically advanced, but because they operated outside the psychological parameters that made conquest possible. His aide remained silent until Vexthul spoke again. "Contact the shipyards. I want production increased on all capital ship classes, and contact the research division. I want every piece of human technology and communication analyzed. We need to understand what we're facing." "Sir, there's one more development you should know about. Our deep space monitors have detected something unusual." Another display activated, showing sensor readings from the edge of the Sol system. Vexthul stared at the data, trying to process what he was seeing. "Sir, it appears the humans have launched additional vessels, not toward our fleet, but away from their system entirely." "Evacuation ships?" "No, sir. Based on their trajectories and energy signatures, they appear to be heading toward other human colonies and installations throughout local space." We estimate at least 50 ships, carrying what our analysts believe to be military personnel and equipment. The implications crashed over Vexthul like a wave. The humans weren't just defending their home world, they were spreading their resistance throughout their territory. How many human colonies are there? Initial surveys identified 17 confirmed settlements across 14 systems. However, given their apparent technological capabilities, there may be many more that we haven't detected. Vexthul realized they were no longer dealing with the conquest of a single world. If the humans were militarizing their entire civilization, the hegemony faced the possibility of having to fight for every human settlement across multiple star systems. Sir, there's something else. The humans appear to be broadcasting on frequencies we didn't know they possessed. We've detected their signals reaching far beyond their local cluster. To where? Unknown, sir. But the signal strength suggests they're attempting to contact entities much farther away than we initially believed their communication range allowed. Vexthul felt the foundations of his understanding crumbling. First contact protocols assumed that primitive species were isolated to their immediate star systems. If the humans had the capability to communicate across vast distances, could they be calling for allies? We don't have enough data to determine that, sir. However, the energy patterns suggest these aren't random signals. They appear to be following specific protocols. The aide brought up another display showing the communication patterns. To Vexthul's experienced eye, they looked remarkably similar to military coordination frequencies. How long have these signals been broadcasting? Since approximately 6 hours after our first contact, sir, the humans began transmitting immediately after our initial demonstration of force. 6 hours. While the hegemony had been preparing for a simple pacification operation, the humans had been calling for help. Vexthul returned to the viewport, watching the endless stream of ships moving through space. For 12 centuries, this site had represented the unstoppable expansion of hegemony power. Now, it looked vulnerable. "Contact all sector commands," he ordered. "I want reports on any unusual activity in human-occupied space, and contact the intelligence division. I want to know everything about human communication capabilities and potential allies." As his aide left to carry out the orders, Vexthul remained at the viewport. Somewhere in the distance, the Sol system continued its orbit around an unremarkable yellow star. But that system now represented something that had never existed in hegemony history, a question mark. The humans had revealed capabilities that shouldn't exist, demonstrated behaviors that made no logical sense, and apparently possessed allies or resources that the hegemony hadn't detected. For the first time in his long career, High Admiral Vexthul wondered if the hegemony might be about to learn what it felt like to be outmatched. 3 days later, his concerns proved prophetic. The first reports came from the Kepler system, where a small hegemony outpost detected incoming vessels of unknown configuration. When they attempted to identify the ships, the response was a coordinated attack that destroyed the outpost before any distress signal could be sent. Similar attacks occurred simultaneously at 7 other locations across hegemony space. Each target was hit by forces using tactics and technologies that matched the human patterns observed at Sol. The humans hadn't been calling for help. They had been coordinating a strike across the entire region. Vexthul stared at the tactical reports, each one representing a failure of intelligence that had cost lives and resources. The humans weren't just defending their territory. They were taking the war to the hegemony. His communication panel activated with an emergency transmission from the Hegemony Council. The faces of the 12 council members appeared, their expressions grave. "High Admiral," the council speaker began, "we have reviewed the situation in human space. The attacks on our outposts represent an unprecedented development in our expansion history." "Yes, Council Speaker. You are authorized to deploy the Third Fleet to the Sol system. This situation must be resolved before it spreads further. The Third Fleet represented 1/4 of the hegemony's total military strength. Deploying it for a single species was unthinkable under normal circumstances. But as Vexthul watched the tactical displays showing human attacks across 7 star systems, he realized that normal circumstances had ended the moment they encountered humanity. Understood, Council Speaker. However, I recommend we also consider the possibility that this conflict may require alternative resolution methods. Explain. The humans appear to prefer warfare to negotiation. Perhaps we should consider offering them something other than conquest. The silence that followed his suggestion was deafening. In 800 years of expansion, the hegemony had never negotiated as equals with another species. The council speaker's response came slowly, each word carefully measured. Proceed with the military solution, High Admiral. If that fails, we will consider alternatives. As the transmission ended, Vexthul began the process of mobilizing the largest fleet in hegemony history. But for the first time, he wasn't certain that superior numbers would be enough. The humans had already proven that they didn't follow the rules. Council Speaker Mordun had ruled the hegemony for 2 centuries. In that time, he had overseen the conquest of 43 star systems and the integration of 18 different species into their empire. His decisions had shaped the lives of billions of beings across the galaxy. None of his experience had prepared him for the reports flooding into the council chambers. The Third Fleet had arrived at Sol 3 days ago, representing the largest single military force the hegemony had ever assembled. 400 ships, including 12 dreadnoughts and the flagship Inevitable, commanded by Fleet Admiral Kratos himself. It should have been more than enough to end human resistance permanently. Instead, the situation had become a catastrophe. Council Speaker, Admiral Kratos appeared on the main display, his image flickering with interference that suggested his ship had sustained damage. I must report that our assessment of human capabilities was fundamentally flawed. Mordun leaned forward in his throne, the weight of the moment pressing down on his ancient shoulders. Specify. The humans were waiting for us, not just their defense fleet, but reinforcements from across their territory. We estimate they assembled over 3,000 vessels for this engagement. 3,000 ships. The intelligence reports had suggested the humans possessed maybe 50 spacecraft total. How is that possible? Sir, we believe the humans have been deliberately concealing the extent of their civilization. What we thought was a single world appears to be the center of a vast network of colonies and installations. They've been building their fleet while we focused on their home world. The tactical display updated to show the Sol system, but it bore no resemblance to the simple single-world system they had originally encountered. The space around the human sun was filled with defensive installations, mobile platforms, and ships of varying configurations. It looked like the capital system of a major galactic power. Our preliminary engagement lasted 14 hours, Kratos continued. The humans employed tactics we've never encountered before. They used their smaller ships as scouts and harassers, while their larger vessels provided coordinated fire support. When we attempted to break through their lines, they did something unprecedented. Explain. They sacrificed entire squadrons to destroy single capital ships, not ramming attacks, but coordinated strikes where multiple human vessels would focus fire on our most powerful ships, accepting their own destruction to eliminate our heavy units. Mordun's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Such tactics violated every principle of space warfare. No commander would trade dozens of ships to eliminate a single enemy vessel. What were your losses? The pause before Kratos answered told him everything he needed to know. 47 ships destroyed, including 3 dreadnoughts, another 68 ships with significant damage. Sir, we've lost approximately 30% of our combat effectiveness in a single engagement. The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. The hegemony had never suffered such losses in any single battle throughout their entire history of expansion. And human losses? Estimated at 400 vessels, but... Kratos hesitated. Sir, they're continuing to reinforce. New ships are arriving every hour, and their production facilities appear to be operating at impossible levels of efficiency. Counselor Vethra, the oldest member of the council, spoke for the first time in the session. Admiral, are you telling us that the humans are replacing their losses faster than we can inflict them? Yes, Counselor. Furthermore, their new ships incorporate design improvements that counter the tactics we used in the previous engagement. They're adapting their technology in real time based on battle experience. Morden felt the foundations of hegemony power shifting beneath him. Their empire was built on technological superiority and the psychological effect of overwhelming force. If the humans could match their production and adapt faster than hegemony forces could adjust. There's more, Kratos continued. We've received communications from 17 other systems reporting coordinated human attacks. The humans haven't just been reinforcing Sol, they've been launching simultaneous operations across our entire border region. The main display shifted to show the galactic map. Red indicators marked human attacks across hundreds of light years. Supply lines, communication relays, isolated outposts, and even defended systems were all under assault. How many ships do the humans possess? Mordun demanded. Unknown, sir. Our estimates increase every hour as new formations reveal themselves. Conservative projections suggest they have at least 10,000 combat vessels, with production capacity for many more. 10,000 ships. The humans had hidden the existence of a military force that rivaled the hegemony's total fleet strength. Sir, Kratos' voice carried a note that Mordun had never heard from any of his commanders before. I need to report something else. We intercepted a human transmission during the battle. It was broadcast on all frequencies, apparently intended for us to hear. What did it say? The translation reads, You wanted to see what humans do when provoked. This is us being polite. Surrender now or learn what happens when we stop holding back. The words hung in the chamber like a physical presence. Mordun's ancient mind struggled to process the implication. The devastating attack that had crippled his fleet was the humans being polite? Admiral, are you suggesting that the humans have additional capabilities they haven't revealed? Sir, analysis of the battle suggests that human vessels were operating well below their potential performance levels. Our technical teams believe their ships are capable of significantly higher acceleration and firepower output than they demonstrated. Counselor Hectoon, military advisor to the council, leaned forward. You're saying they could have inflicted even greater losses but chose not to? That appears to be the case, yes, sir. The implications crashed through Mordun's consciousness like a tsunami. The humans had crippled the largest fleet in hegemony history while deliberately restraining themselves. They were sending a message, submit or face their full capabilities. Sir, Kratos continued, there's one more development. Long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures from the direction of human space. Something large is approaching our position. Specify. Sir, based on the signatures we're detecting, it appears to be a ship approximately 50 times the size of our largest dreadnought. It will reach Sul within 6 hours. 50 times larger. Such a vessel would be more mobile space station than ship, capable of carrying firepower that could devastate entire fleets. How long would it take to construct such a vessel? Mordun asked. Sir, our largest shipyards would require approximately 15 years to build something of that scale. 15 years, which meant the humans had been building it long before first contact with the hegemony. They had been preparing for this war before the hegemony even knew they existed. Sir, one of his aides interrupted urgently. Priority transmission from the Intelligence Division. The display switched to show Intelligence Director Sector, whose usually calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled panic. Council Speaker, we've completed our analysis of human communication intercepts. We've discovered something critical about human civilization. Proceed. Sir, the humans we've been fighting aren't a single unified species. They're actually multiple human populations from different star systems who have formed a defensive alliance. What we thought was concealment of their true capabilities was actually them calling in allies from across the galaxy. The revelation hit Morden like a physical blow. They weren't fighting a hidden empire. They were fighting a coalition that spanned the known galaxy. How many human populations are there? Sir, based on communication intercepts and ship design analysis, we estimate at least 40 separate human civilizations have contributed forces to this conflict. Some appear to be significantly more technologically advanced than others. 40 civilizations. The hegemony had thought they were conquering a primitive single-world species. Instead, they had attacked one member of a galactic alliance. Sir, Sector continued, there's something else. The most technologically advanced human groups appear to have been holding back, allowing the less advanced populations to handle the initial response. The massive ship approaching Sol appears to originate from what we're classifying as a Type 2 human civilization. What does that mean? Sir, it means we may have just provoked beings with technology centuries ahead of our own. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Morden stared at the tactical display, watching as red icons representing human attacks spread across hegemony space like a plague. Council Speaker, Admiral Kratos' voice returned. The massive human vessel has just entered the Sol system. Sir, it's not a ship. Clarify. It appears to be some form of mobile construction facility. It's deploying thousands of smaller vessels and beginning construction of orbital installations around every planet in the system. Sir, they're turning the entire Sol system into a fortress. The display showed the human megastructure, a moving city-sized facility that dwarfed anything in hegemony records. As they watched, streams of ships poured from its construction bays, each one larger and more sophisticated than the vessels that had already devastated the Third Fleet. Sir, Kratos' voice now carried a note of defeat. I'm receiving a transmission from the human command structure. They're offering us terms. Terms. They call it a conditional cessation of hostilities. If we withdraw all forces from human space and formally recognize human territorial sovereignty, they'll allow our retreating forces safe passage. The words struck the chamber like thunderbolts. A species was offering terms to the hegemony. In 800 years of expansion, such a thing had never happened. And if we refuse? They've indicated that our current experience represents approximately 5% of their total military capability. If we refuse their terms, they'll demonstrate what they call total warfare. Morden closed his ancient eyes, feeling the weight of 8 centuries of hegemony expansion crushing down on him. They had built their empire on the assumption that they were the most advanced military force in the galaxy. That assumption had just been shattered. Sir, Kratos added quietly, based on my observations of human tactics and capabilities, I believe they're capable of implementing their threats. Council Speaker, another priority transmission activated, showing the face of Governor Nalvix from the border systems. Sir, we're receiving reports from across the frontier. Human forces have systematically destroyed or captured every hegemony installation within 50 light-years of their territory. They've cut off supply lines to 4 sector fleets. The map displayed the scope of human operations. In less than a week, they had effectively isolated 1/3 of hegemony military forces and crippled their ability to operate in the region. How many casualties? Morden asked. Sir, the humans appear to be offering terms to every installation they capture. Those who surrender are allowed to evacuate. Those who resist are... The governor paused. Sir, they're completely destroyed. No survivors, no wreckage large enough to analyze. Morden understood the message. The humans were demonstrating both mercy and overwhelming capability. They could annihilate hegemony forces completely, but chose to offer alternatives. "Sir," Intelligence Director Sector interrupted again. "We've received additional communication from the Human Alliance. They're requesting a formal diplomatic meeting. What are their terms? They want to discuss what they call mutual non-interference agreements and territorial recognition protocols. Sir, they're not demanding our surrender. They're offering to negotiate boundaries." The concept was revolutionary. For 800 years, the hegemony had expanded through conquest. The idea of negotiating territorial agreements with equals was unprecedented. "There's more, sir. They've indicated that several other species have approached them requesting similar agreements. It appears the humans are attempting to establish what they call a galactic peace framework." Other species. Morden realized that the hegemony's expansion had created enemies they had never recognized. Species who had submitted not out of acceptance, but out of necessity, waiting for someone strong enough to offer them an alternative. "Council Speaker." Councillor Vethra spoke again, her voice carrying the wisdom of her centuries. "Perhaps we should consider that our expansion phase has reached its natural conclusion." The words hung in the air, like a challenge to everything the hegemony represented. But as Morden stared at the tactical display showing human forces positioned throughout their frontier, he realized she was right. "Admiral Kratos," he spoke slowly, each word carrying the weight of historical change. "Inform the human command that the Hegemony Council is prepared to discuss their proposals." "Sir, we'll negotiate boundaries." The transmission ended, leaving Morden alone with his thoughts. For 800 years, the hegemony had believed they were the most advanced military force in the galaxy. The humans had proven that assumption wrong in less than a week. But more than that, they had offered something the hegemony had never considered: coexistence. As reports continued to flow in of human operations across hegemony space, Morden began to understand what they had truly accomplished. They hadn't just defeated the Third Fleet, they had forced the most powerful empire in known space to recognize that there were limits to expansion. The humans had taught the hegemony what happened when you provoked a species that valued freedom more than safety, cooperation more than conquest, and justice more than order. They had learned that some species couldn't be conquered because they refused to accept that conquest was inevitable. 3 days later, representatives from the hegemony and the Human Alliance met aboard a neutral station in empty space between their territories. The negotiations would last months, but the outcome was already clear. The age of unlimited expansion was over. The age of galactic diplomacy had begun, and it had started because someone had made the mistake of provoking humanity.